I think I'll start by saying that I was born in 1987 in a country which no longer exists, which is very strange to think about, that a country no longer exists in 2024. So my country that I was born in was Yugoslavia. And in 1992, 1993, that country was torn apart, and depending on who you ask nowadays, it now consists of 6 or 7 different countries. So my life kind of started out broken from, I wouldn't say day one, but after a few years of life, my parents decided to pack up and leave that place forever. They put my brother and I on a bus in the night and took us across the border. And that's where our migrant journey started. I was obviously unaware of what was going on. We were going on a trip, we were going on airplanes, we were visiting family, we were doing fun stuff, and my parents always kind of made it a happy journey. And after a couple of years of moving around from one place to another, from New Zealand and Australia to London and Vienna, where we had some family, we ended up in Malta in 1994. My dad came a little bit before. And in 1994, my mom and my brother and I came to Malta. And we came to this new place, and we were told, this is where you live now. We had a nice big house. We enrolled in a school, we got uniforms, and we were now told, okay, that's it. Unfortunately, we didn't speak English. So that was problem number one. My parents didn't speak English either. So the first 6 months of school were quite challenging. I was about 6, my brother was about 4, and we essentially just had the two of us. We were friends. We were hanging out during the breaks. We were always together. We were taking care of each other because we could just communicate, the two of us. I remember, well, I don't remember, this is stories my parents tell us. My brother came home one day and he said, I don't want to go to school anymore. And my mom asked him, why not? And he said, because nobody understands what I'm saying in school. I talk to them and they just don't listen. Of course, he was speaking in Serbo-Croatian at the time, so he was very frustrated. But we learned English very quickly. We changed schools. We stayed together. We had a lovely experience at school. We went to, at the time, a pretty international school. We were one of few international students at the school. We were exempt from Maltese, we were exempt from religion, and I think that's where the sensation of being different started. So we finally learned the language, and we were finally going to another school where we would be normal. But we didn't go to all the classes like all the other kids, which was fine. As children, you don't really think much about it, but in retrospect, I think maybe we should have been encouraged to integrate a little bit more. So my family kind of kept living a very Balkan life in this country, in Malta. There was quite a big community. There was about 15,000 of us at the time, all coming for the same reason, really. So all our friends and all our experiences were mostly Balkan. So the food that we ate, the parties that my parents hosted and their friends hosted were all full of, Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian music. They would fly over musicians and, make these big parties for the holidays that we would celebrate back home, or they would celebrate back home, which were obviously very different to the ones in Malta. We didn't really celebrate Christmas. We celebrated, Republic Day and some national holidays. So we were always kind of aware that we were different. Our friends at school were super loving and very open to us. We integrated very well. We always had friends. We played all kinds of sports. We represented the school. So it was a really weird existence. So you feel like you belong, but then you go home and you're like in this different universe, yeah? And that was constantly happening. We would fly back to see our family. That was still in Croatia or Serbia. My family is a little bit split all over the place. We would go there. We would be different over there. But we knew that that's where we come from. We would come back to Malta. We felt like we belonged here partially. but we knew that we were different. So this dual existence and dual identity, I think, still lives in me. Obviously now I manage it a little bit better. But the war was still going on, and in Malta, many people weren't really aware of what was going on, especially kids. Nobody cares about the news. And I remember one day we were on Easter holidays, and it was the 1999 bombings in the NATO bombings in Serbia. And I remember my parents were at work, and they told us, "You're going to stay home. You're going to try and call your grandparents 50 times a day because you couldn't get through, so you'd have to keep calling and calling and calling, and eventually you'd manage." And we would watch the news, and we would watch these bombings and this chaos going on, and then report to our parents what had happened during the day, because they were at work. Obviously, they were working day and night. So I spent my holidays a little bit differently to a lot of people and children here. But again, for us this was normal. We lived here, we lived there. Things were happening over there. We saw it on TV. We would call our grandparents. Once in a while, we would get through. We'd ask them, "Hey, how's it going?" They would tell us, "Oh, it's perfect. Everything is fine." We think everything is fine, and life would go on. But you always have the sense of something not being right. Subconsciously, you always feel like, is this real? Is this normal? Is this what everybody else is going through? You couldn't really explain it to people. You couldn't really explain it to yourself. You were shuttled from one place to another. So I think one of my most vivid memories of that time was, so this is my passport. It still says Yugoslavia. Obviously it's changed since then. But this passport was my biggest trauma, I think, as a kid, because this writing here would determine whether I could come to Malta and remain here with my family or not. So I used to stress about these pages of my passports. Every time I would go to the passport control, the guys would take my passport, I would stand there, very nervous, they would read it, they would look at it, they would look at me, they would look at my parents in the back, talk to each other, and I would always think, okay, they're going to tell me that I can't live here anymore. And that was my biggest fear. And I kid you not, till today, at passport control, I have a little panic attack inside, because I think somebody's going to tell me that there's something wrong with your papers and you can't be here. You have to go. Till today. Which is really weird. So anyway, long story short, I grew up, I got to university, and I couldn't go to university in Malta. Well, I could, but I was a third country national. And university was going to cost a fortune for me here. So we decided together that I would go back to Serbia, because university would be free for me there, and I had some family there. So I moved my life at 17 to Serbia, where I was born, to Belgrade, where I was born, a place where I was born, and I never really spent much time there. And I picked up and I left, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go to this place where I was born, where I belong, and I'm gonna figure life out. Malta was great, but still good. So I moved to Serbia, and of course it was great, it was fun, but I was totally different to all the people who were living in Serbia at the time. Serbia had gone through a lot. I obviously was completely separate to everything that had been going on there. I didn't experience all the traumas. I was quite oblivious and I was a bit naive. So I went back and I didn't get that sense of, this is where I belong, this is me, this is my people. Which was a bit disappointing. Because I thought, okay, if I don't feel like I belong in Malta, where I've spent most of my life, and I don't feel like I belong in Serbia, where I was born, where I should feel like I belong, then where do I belong? And I think this is the question that I struggled to answer for many, many years. So I spent about 8 years in Serbia. I finished my studies and I decided that I would come back to Malta to try it out for a second time. Of course, Malta had changed. 10 years had made a big difference here. There was many more foreigners living here, different cultures, different people. I loved it when I came back. I felt, okay, this is going to be interesting. I'm not the only different kind of citizen here now. So I came back to Malta with all my Serbian experience all my Serbian papers, and I was told that because you're coming from Serbia and it's a non-EU state, we cannot recognize you. We cannot recognize what you've done. Your stay here is going to be difficult because you're a non-European citizen. So at 26 or 27, I started the whole process of migrating back to the country which I migrated to when I was 7, 20 years later. Obviously now I was an adult, I didn't have that initial fear that I had before, but I realized that I had to figure it out. So I said, okay, fine, what do I have to do? Here are my papers, this is me, these are my passports, these are my documents, here's my birth certificate, here's my parents' birth certificate, here's their parents' birth certificate, this is me. How do I fix it? Because I thought it would be a very simple process, which turned out to be a very complicated process. But in any case, you know, I went to the offices, I went to Identity Malta 150 times, I walked out in tears 152 times, I got all the papers that I needed, I did everything that they asked of me, and 24 years later, I was naturalized as a citizen in Malta, and I got my Maltese citizenship. And I thought, now what? I have this piece of paper that says I'm Maltese. Am I Maltese? I had to get a birth certificate for Malta, and I thought, that's weird, I wasn't born here, why do I need a birth certificate for Malta? So I went and I got a Maltese birth certificate, which says, you know, born in Belgrade. It's very weird. It's very weird how a piece of paper can determine what route you're going to take in life. You know, one piece of paper could say, okay, you can do whatever you want, no problem. And another piece of paper could tell you, no, sorry, you have to stop here. So I took all those papers with me. I remember coming home, I get the certificate, I get this passport, I have the old passport, and I'm thinking, okay, I guess this is what it feels like to be normal. This is what it feels like to be able to do what you want to do without anybody telling you you can't because of where you were born. And that was really life-changing. And I remember traveling for the first time with my Maltese passport. And I went to the border control, and I gave them my brand new passport. I looked at them, they looked at my passport, they just gave it back to me and said, you can go. And I was very confused because I always got a question at border control. And I just walked through, I looked back, I said, oh my God, that was so easy. So yes, I think my story really is about looking for a place of belonging. I think that's every human story. Trying to understand where we belong and why we belong to places that we think we belong to. And also about learning how to belong to yourself, primarily, and understand who you are. And acknowledging that you belong to yourself makes it very much simpler to belong anywhere else. Because if you're okay with who you are and who you've become and the belonging you've acquired for yourself, I think it's very easy to start to belong anywhere. So I feel like the most important lesson throughout my journey was understanding who I am by birth, understanding who I've become throughout all my life's journey, and understanding how now I can function as this complete human who also has documentation to justify who I've become. And I think now I look at the world very differently. I think belonging is how you feel here and not on a piece of paper. But when you have both, it's a game changer. And now I look at life and think, okay, well, I can take these papers and just go and belong wherever I wish. So yeah, that was my journey of becoming and belonging in this country. And I'm very grateful that I have managed to stay here, actually. and that I choose to stay here now, every time.